CGI to recreate this iconic practical effect from The Shining.
Chat, everyone to watch this chat.
Video, you'll discover which approach looks better, which costs more, and why CGI is so.
Oh, I just want to say this. Everyone to watch this.
To start, we import the photo into software called FSpy, which will use to draw out the axes, guess the measurements, and infer the focal length, as this will just make it easier to model from. Then you bring that into your favorite 3D software package where you'll do most of the work. In my case, it's Blender because it's free and open source, and it's what my channel is about. So hit subscribe and then watch my beginner series if you want to learn it. Now we just trace what we see. A hallway here, a coffee table there, maybe an over-engineered oil heater over here. Sometimes you can buy models online, but if you're recreating a set, you
Wait, that's kind of cool, chat.
So that it's a precise match. The easy stuff is usually simple, hard surface objects, and the difficult stuff is often organic and complex.
Dude, that looks fun as shit.
A single artist should be able to finish modeling everything in this scene in about 2 days. Next up, lighting. Often this is done by capturing
What, did you say 2 days? Wait, hold on. You said what?
In about 2 days. Next up, lighting.
Days?
Often this is done by capturing a reflective
Alright, fuck it, I'm not doing that shit.
HDRI, but if you don't have that, which we don't, we can make
fuck that shit, this is some nerd bullshit.
Reference photos of where the physical lights in the scene are. Then we need textures, which, if they weren't captured on location, could be downloaded from a site like Polygon, which has common materials designed for 3D photorealism. Importantly, each texture comes with these extra images known as maps, which are used by the 3D renderer to understand how the surface reacts to light. Setting up a material in 3D can be surprisingly time-consuming, but that's why smart artists use plugins. So for example, Polygon provides a plugin which not only downloads and imports
this is
the texture,
busted,
but also sets up the material for you. I might be biased, but I use Polygon all the time.
This looks easy to use.
It's not an exact match, so you use additional textures known as surface imperfections to layer on smudges, scratches, or whatever the photo reference says you need. Texturing often takes longer than modeling, but it's still fairly predictable for a skilled artist. Texturing a scene like this shouldn't take longer than 2 to 3 days. So,
wait, stop fucking around, dude. Stop with this. Yo, stop fucking around, Hammer.
Texturing a scene like this shouldn't take longer than 2 to 3 days.
Days!
We've got a pretty close replication, but something is off. All the main ingredients are there, but this still looks like a 3D render.
Oh my god, don't tell me there's more to do.
The reason can be found plastered all around the Barnstorm VFX studio. Grain, focus, levels.
No,
which,
man.
according to them, are the most common mistakes in VFX shots. Grain means adding noise to emulate the natural effect of film and digital camera sensors. There's a common misconception.
What? Wait, this video has white noise in it.
Emulate the natural effect of film and digital camera sensors. There's a common misconception that you can just render at low samples to create this grain, but you can't, or at the very least you shouldn't. It's splotchy, contains fireflies, it fluctuates across the frame depending on the object, it's just ugly. Whereas camera sensor noise is typically uniform and more smooth across the frame. So the correct way to emulate film grain is to first denoise all of that CG noise, then use an After Effects plugin like Film Convert to add in film noise on top
I'm not doing that.
It sounds counterintuitive, but
no,
it makes a big
that.
difference. Focus means matching the sharpness of the camera. CG images are perfectly crisp, and this is impossible in the real world. So you enable depth of field, set something as your point of focus, and adjust the aperture till it matches the photo. But even then, the CG image will still look too sharp because no lens is perfect. So a trick that I've just started using is to add a tiny amount of blur
of noise,
to the entire image. Again, you wouldn't think this would do much, but it's often the missing piece to realism. And finally, levels means using the waveform and histogram to ensure that there's the same amount of
blur. You know what, chat? You know what the secret is, chat? I just figured it out. Whenever everything starts falling down, because of the bit rate and the blur, the match will actually
blues in each.
I can see it.
Now, without a color calibrated reference,
because it'll pixelize.
We have one hand tied behind our back because it's impossible for us to know if
I have no idea what I'm talking about
to it, or if it's the light, or even the color grade. So the best we can do is guess. Do lots of side-by-side comparisons, looking at each object up close, tweaking it and re-rendering it till the waveform matches as best we can. So grain, focus,
how many days are we talking this?
Before, after.
Oh,
Our
wow.
digital set is finally finished, which means the real work now begins on the fluid simulation. While Blender does have a fluid simulator, it's so frustratingly unstable that almost nobody uses it. Thankfully though, there's a paid add-on called Flip Fluid that works surprisingly well. It's not as feature complete as the industry standard Houdini, but also not as expensive.
No,
every simulation
I've seen people use that actually. Yeah,
starts the same
I've
way.
seen
You set the boundary
it gets
space,
wonky for sure.
where the obstacles are, and then you add an object to act as your fluid. Then you just push this magical bake button and wait about 10 minutes for the result. Problem with simulations though is that they never do quite what you'd expect. So you fix all the problems, wait another 10 minutes to see what you get, then you identify all those new problems, fix those, try again, and again.
That seems like coding in general though, no?
Tens or even hundreds of times. You quickly learn that the aim of the game is to reduce the time it takes to simulate, which you can do by making proxy low-res versions of every obstacle, reducing the size of the boundary box, and making sure fluid isn't getting trapped somewhere that it shouldn't. And it's when the finish line seems so close that I typically spend the most amount of time. You're confident that it's ready for the final bake.
This looks pretty good.
Increase the resolution to the highest setting you can stomach,
and then your GPU breaks
for the simulation to finish, and then sigh as you spot one more mistake that requires a remake.
Well,
but eventually, after a solid 6 days of baking, you end up with a simulation that it doesn't have any glaring issues, which is the best I can usually hope for. So finally, to make it look like blood, we give it a glass shader and then add volume absorption.
Okay, chat, now I feel bad, chat. This guy spends 2 days modeling, 3 days texturing, 5 days denoising, 6 days rendering, does it again for another 6 days, and I'm here 10 minutes into the video and I just yoink that shit.
The light terminates, the deeper it penetrates. For the final render, the fluid got so dense at around frame 300 that my 43090s ran out of GPU memory, meaning I had to render the rest of the sequence on a much slower CPU. So all up, it was about 4 days of rendering at 15,000 samples a frame, and to finish it, just drag that sequence into Premiere, add in the film grain, and ladies and gentlemen, we have our final shot.
Let's watch it. You know the problem that I have with this?
Comparing it,
it's the gooiness. And the problem that I have with this, chat, is the surface tension on the water isn't really natural. It holds too strong. Even if it's blood, at the speed it's going, it still would act. Guys, because it's going so fast, it's still going to separate it. It's gooing up.
Comparing it to the original, the winner is obviously practical. I'm not the best 3D artist, but arguably ILM is. And even their recreation in Ready Player One doesn't look as good as the original. Which brings us back to our question. If CG is usually inferior, why is it so frequently chosen? The first reason you can probably guess is cost. According to a film director in LA that I spoke with, this shot...
Yo, dude. Guys, this is a double answer. It's not only cost, it's cost through time. Time crunches, and then cost makes sense because of time.
It would be about 50K on the very cheap end.
I think.
But more realistically, about 100K plus due to unforeseen costs.
Wait, he said what? Lumber construction. Okay, yeah.
CG, on the other hand, is a fraction of the price. According to some effects TDs I spoke with, this could be done for about 14K on the cheap, or 20K for feature quality, or about 1/5 of the price. And related...
Chat, you know what? Something also, chat? I'm not an expert. I think, what if this fails? I would assume that sometimes things just gonna fail and don't work, and then you have to like redo it, and then build another one, and then it's time, it gets really fucky.
According
I can see this game getting bad really fast.
This could be done for about 14K on the cheap, or 20K for feature quality, or about 1/5 of the price. And related to cost is risk, because practical effects frequently go wrong. A real house was set fire for a Russian film called The Sacrifice, but right as they started filming, the camera jammed, meaning they got no footage and were forced to rebuild the entire house from scratch and shoot it again.
Say it.
In Inception, an explosive charge failed to detonate, meaning this tower fell the wrong way. And ironically, when they filmed the miniature version, the exact same thing happened. So in The Shining, Stanley Kubrick was so anxious about this elevator...
No, those if we watch that, 5-head, smart, knowledgeable, intelligent, on the spot, spontaneous, juice lord...
...scene that he wasn't even present for the shoot. The entire investment hinged on every component working correctly as planned, and luckily it did. But it's no surprise then that today
that looks really good though.
Scenes are often done in CG. Shit. Simulations can be rerun, models can be reused, or sets redesigned for cents on the dollar. Another advantage is...
Guys, I think I'm right about this. It's really that the water is so gooey, and the drops... Guys, all the drops are consistent in their size on the splitting it. I think normally you'd have a wide variety of blobs and splashes. It's buggy. This looks unnatural because of it.
Models can be reused or sets redesigned for cents on the dollar. Another advantage is flexibility. If Stanley made the crushing realization that the camera was actually too far from the action, he would have no choice but to reshoot it. CG, on the other hand, is flexible to a fault. You want the camera to move? No problem. You want the lights to flicker? Easy. It's so flexible, it's actually led to a game that Phil Tippett calls Find What's Wrong with This Shot. But, misuse aside, flexibility is a big reason why CG is chosen to begin with. The final advantage is safety. In the movie, you'll notice that while we see Shelley, then the blood, then Shelley, we never see both in the same shot. Which actually creates a problem for the audience, because we don't know if this is real or if she hallucinated it. Which is why I think this shot could be improved if it was CG. Because you could have Shelley run right up to the elevator, the doors open, you switch to a digital double, and we see her get washed away. Just like in Ready Player One.
What? Wait, this brother man said what?
Be improved if it was CG. Because you could have Shelley run right up to the elevator, the doors open, you switch to a digital double, and we see her get washed away. Just like in
This thing is right. I'm gonna go ahead and not disregard the cinematography and vision that goes by in the movie, just from a complete practical standpoint.
Player One. It's rarely talked about, but safety is one of the most valuable uses for CG today. Padding is removed, sets are heightened, and digital humans are stomped, essentially letting us have our cake and eat it too. Feels dangerous, and nobody died. But for all the advantages to CG, there is one major disadvantage.
Guys, because that may be why, maybe the director said, that's how I want it to be. I want it to be like this. Straight up.
But for all the advantages to CG, there is one major disadvantage. Thrill. Part of the reason Jackie Chan films are so fun to watch is because you know it's real. There's real pain, real danger, and real skill. Today's audiences don't see a lot of that. They know that if there's a slight risk of an accident, or it's too difficult, or it's cheaper, then it'll probably just be shot on green screen. So, when I watched this scene from Extraction 2, I actually didn't think much of it. A clever trick, probably done with a crane, a shaky platform, and a green screen. Until I watched some promotional material and discovered that it was real. They really just landed a helicopter on a moving train. Now I look at the shot differently. The result hasn't changed, but my knowledge of how it was filmed has changed my enjoyment. This isn't acting. Everybody here is...
Wait, I like the other shot better, but they can't make it work in the movie like that. Because the whole movie would have to be shot in the same sort of 60 frames, almost janky type of filming, and it wouldn't stick together.
Now I look at the shot differently. The result
I like the other one better.
Changed, but my knowledge of how it was filmed has changed my enjoyment. This isn't acting. Everybody here is really scared, and it took extreme skill by the pilot to pull it off. In essence, I can relate
and the
to
risk
what I'm
too.
seeing. Studios have realized this, that if an audience knows a stunt was shot practically, it not only makes the shot more interesting, but it will probably sell more tickets. Which is why we're now told through copious amounts of marketing what was shot practically. Even if it's
that's whatever though, dude.
I mean, what's a cooler story? I simulated this on my computer, or they really
Nobody
flooded
gives
a
a
hotel
shit.
with blood. Which is why it might not even matter that CG is cheaper, more flexible.
Yeah, guys, everybody looks at this and says, okay, cool. If you're gonna watch a movie or not watch a movie, it's not a big fucking deal breaker, dude. Just stop. Yeah, just stop. It's something you read and you're like, oh, cool. But it might change 1%, less than 1% of the people who are gonna see or not see the movie because of
if the belief that it's practical gets more butts in seats, then it might be worth doing for real. They just need to make sure that they promote that one stunt that was practical and not talk about the rest of the movie. That's why I think CG is
that looked like fucking garbage though. Like what?
Was practical and not talk about the rest of the movie. That's why I think CG is a lot like a magic trick. The audience doesn't actually want to know how it's done. And provided you don't tell them, they'll happily believe that they just witnessed something incredible.
Guys, the train just disappeared into the water. That is not how...
Movie industry is what it's all about. If you enjoyed this video, you might like this one, where I remade an abandoned house from The Last of Us.
It was real.
Click here to watch it, and I'll see you next time.
Are you fucking dumb?
And it took computer who gets sure that they promote one stunt and not talk about the rest of the movie. That's why I think CG is...
Oh, this chat is bugging.
A lot like a magic trick. The audience doesn't...